This video will supplement the readings on writing summaries in the course. Make sure to review the link, PowerPoint, and examples on eCampus in addition to watching this video. So many students believe a summary is one of the easier college writing assignments. However, writing an effective summary can be quite difficult because you have to maintain the precise meaning without directly copying the words, sentence structure, or style of the original author. What is a summary? In short, a summary is a work that restates in your own words the main ideas of another work. When writing a summary, ask yourself, what are the main ideas or the central arguments that this author is making? Avoid describing specific examples, illustrations, or background information, and focus on just communicating those major ideas. Sometimes the main ideas are implied, which means the author doesn't state them outright and instead relies on you, the reader, to make inferences based on the examples they provide. In that case, you should look closely at the examples or details or illustrations and determine what point they prove. In your summary, capture the main point that those examples prove. Here are some qualities of an effective summary. A good summary is direct. This means it gets right to the point and it uses direct, literal language. Instead of using figurative language like metaphors or similes, you want to state the ideas directly and explicitly. A good summary is also accurate and precise. What I mean by accurate is that you want to make sure that you communicate what the author says correctly and don't change their meaning. To be precise means you want to capture their exact ideas. You don't want to overly generalize or change them in a slight way. So a good summary should capture the ideas correctly and precisely. And a good summary is also objective. To be objective means that you must withhold judgment or bias. You must simply report on what the author says, even if you disagree with them or think their argument is problematic. Okay, let's talk about some things you can do while composing your summary to make sure that your summary has those qualities that I just went over. So first, when you open your summary, you want to make it clear that you are summarizing somebody else's ideas. Open your summary with the author's full name, the title of the work you are summarizing, and the main thesis or idea in the work. So here's some examples. In The Effort Effect, Marina Krakovsky summarizes the research of Carol Dweck to show that a growth mindset can help a person achieve greater success than a fixed mindset. Another way we can achieve the same goals, according to Marina Krakovsky in The Effort Effect, a growth mindset can help a person achieve greater success than a fixed mindset. She bases this claim on the research of psychologist Carol Dweck. Notice in both examples, we have the title of the work that is being summarized, we have the author, and we have the main idea of the work. In one sentence, we've boiled down the sort of central claim of the entire article. And this is how we can open our summary, so it's very clear what we're going to be summarizing. As you learned in the lesson on paraphrase, when you put information into your own words, it's not enough to simply change the vocabulary. You also need to change the sentence structure. In a summary, you want to do this the same way. You want to avoid direct quotes. You want to focus on putting the information that is conveyed in your own style. You can change the sentence structure by moving phrases around or combining main ideas, but one thing to be careful of is that you don't want to change the order of points in an argument. An argument may no longer make sense if you change the order in which the ideas are presented. You just want to change up the sentence structure, not the overall structure of the argument. Make sure to go back and refer to the video on paraphrasing for more information on putting information into your own words and for more detailed examples on what it means to change the vocabulary and the sentence structure. Another thing you want to do to create an effective summary is to credit the author with precise verbs. These verbs are the words we use to show exactly what an author is doing throughout their article. So for example, you might say things like, Krakovsky writes, she says, then she talks about, throughout your summary to tell us what she's doing as you introduce her ideas. Now, when I say precise verbs, we want to make it clear what the author is thinking or what they're doing with their argument. So these verbs, writes, says, and talks about, are actually not good ones to use to introduce what an author is doing. They're very vague, and talks about is pretty informal, so it's not really appropriate for an academic summary. Instead, we want to use words that are more precise. So if an author is making an argument, we can say things like, Krukowski argues, she asserts, she further claims, the author contends. These words give us a better idea of what the author is doing when they're making a claim that others could disagree with. If your author is simply explaining or describing something rather than arguing, we could say, she explains, then she describes, the author shows, this example illustrates. We can use these words when the author is not arguing, but is instead simply giving us information. There are many things that an author may be doing in an academic article, so you want to make sure to learn precise verbs that illustrate all the different things that authors can do, whether they're arguing, explaining, disagreeing with somebody, disproving another argument, refuting a claim, acknowledging the other side. One element of being a good academic writer is learning all of these moves so that you can use precise verbs when you are summarizing somebody else's work. Another thing to be aware of is you don't want to put these tags in front of every sentence in a summary. You don't have to tell us the author explains at the beginning of every sentence if you are writing multiple sentences where she's explaining. Just remember to drop them in occasionally, particularly when an author changes what they're doing. So if an author moves from making a claim to describing her point, why she said that, you can tell us when she changes. So she argues, you might have a few sentences of what she argued, and then you can switch to, she illustrates these points by, and then tell us how does she prove them, what evidence does she give. In an effective summary, we also need to maintain the balance in the original article. What this means is you in your summary need to give the same attention and detail to points that an author does. So let me see if I can explain this in sort of like a mathematical sort of way. I know this is an English class, but we're going to do a little math here. Say you read a 20-page article and the author makes 5 points. And the author decides that each of these points is of equal importance, and so the author writes about 4 pages for each point. That means that you in your summary need to give the same balance to the points. So if you're writing a 2-page summary, you don't want to write an entire page over 1 point and then rush through the other 4 on the second page. That's not maintaining balance. You've implied that the author gives much more attention to the first point than the other 4. You want to pay close attention to how much detail an author goes in for each point and make sure you give the same attention and detail. That doesn't mean that you actually have to do like a mathematical equation every time you write a summary, but you should map out the points, maybe use things like different colored highlighters to see where they're paying the most attention, and then you should do the same in your own summary. If an author gives a lot more space in their article to one point, then you should give more sentences to that point in your summary so that you keep the balance. Don't create an unbalanced summary by writing too much about the first point. This is something I see all the time. When you start writing, we often tend to default into more detail than is necessary. And then when you start running out of space, you rush through the last few points. If you map out the argument ahead of time, use an outline or, like I said, highlighters to create a visual representation, you'll have a plan going into it of how much space and time you can give each point. Finally, how to close a summary. The ending of a summary is just as important as the beginning. It's important that your final sentence helps the summary feel complete. Your reader shouldn't feel as if things just cut off suddenly. They should feel pretty confident that they've reached the end. One thing you can do is use a transition to signal that you're coming to the end. A word like overall or ultimately tells the reader that you're about to, sum things up and cap them off. So they work really well to open the final sentence. Share the ultimate goal of the piece. Ultimately, Krukowski wants the readers to learn and tell us what that lesson is. One thing you have to be careful of is this is a place where it's really tempting to put your own judgment in, where you accidentally slip in your opinion. But even in the closing sentence, stay focused on what the author is saying and doing, not what you think about it. Stay objective throughout the summary. Okay, quick recap of what you need to do in order to write an effective summary. Be direct, accurate, precise, and objective. Make sure you write in your own words and style, so don't copy any of those words or sentences directly from the original, and make sure you're putting things in your own style. At the beginning, introduce the author, title, and thesis. Make sure you focus on main ideas and avoid specific examples, illustrations, background, anything that's sort of supporting details. Use precise verbs when crediting the author to make sure it's clear what the author is doing in their original work. Maintain the balance of the original. Finally, end your summary by stating what the author hopes the reader will take away from the work. Of course, what we've talked about today is when you're writing sort of a standalone summary. This might be, a summary essay where your entire work is just summarizing somebody else. This could be a paragraph in a longer paper. So of course, as we move through the course, you will have an opportunity to respond. But as you're writing on your summary, this is what you need to do. Stay focused on what the author is saying and sort of follow the, things we've talked about today. Make sure to look at the examples that are posted in our course and email me if you have any questions. Thanks.